Thank you. All right.
Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much, guys. Really happy to be here. Who doesn't know what AWS is? Okay. Where do you host your website? Okay, so they're your server, right? Okay, AWS is just another server. They're Amazon Web Services, and they're just kind of taking over the world in in everything. But their digital stuff is actually where most of their profits come from, and they just have an endless, line of innovations that they've come up with. And so I want to share just a few of them here with you guys, okay? So just a little bit about me. I'm currently a web developer. I do maintenance and hosting, like managed WordPress hosting for some of my clients. I have a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from the University of Florida. And right after graduating college, I went to work overseas on the family business. I'm originally from Chile. And so I went to work down there, and we have a dealership of machinery. And so, my father started this company, and I went to help. I loved it. Then he passed away, and then, I took over. We got into some other areas. But Chile is very, very small. Its GDP is about the quarter of Houston for the whole country. So you get to limitations really fast. People aren't thinking big, and so I just decided to move back and kind of pursue this passion, which I've been doing as a hobby almost my entire time since I was down there. I mean, I remember the first thing that I did was set up an ERP system, and then it was always just kind of automating and doing the tech stuff that really excited me more than actually going to the clients and dealing with the bureaucracy. So that's kind of my story in in a minute. All right, so today we're going to cover a couple of topics that to me are are becoming really important for WordPress. And this is kind of where I think WordPress is going now. It could take, somebody could invent something tomorrow and it could take it in a whole different direction, but this is where I see it going, at least for the next couple of years. So we're going to talk about the L2 AMP stack, which is similar to the LAMP stack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. We're going to talk about RDS and Redis, what they are and how they can help your website. We're going to talk about security, what all this costs, and some future proofing, some things that I see coming up for WordPress, and then open it up for questions. All right, so L2MP. Does anybody know what that stands for, or what want to take a guess at it? All right. All right, so the first part is Linux, right? Linux is on almost all web servers. It's the foundation. You choose your flavor. It could be, usually it's CentOS or Ubuntu. I personally like Ubuntu. For what I'm talking about here, I've done most of it on Ubuntu. I like CentOS, but I just like Ubuntu a little bit better. The second L is a Litespeed server. This is a web server, so similar to Apache. You have Apache, you have Nginx, you have IIS, which is the Windows web server. Then you've got a bunch of other ones, and Litespeed is kind of the new kid on the block, but I'll explain why it's really great. The M is MariaDB, not MySQL. MariaDB is an open source database. I'll go into that, and then PHP. Make sure it's 7.3 or higher. 7.4 just came out last month, but 7.3 has support until the end of next year. So, okay. All right, so we're going to talk about the Litespeed web server. Okay, so this web server essentially takes all the commands from all the instructions from Apache. So like if you've ever had to modify your .htaccess file, that's the file that talks directly to the Apache server. So it says, before you load anything, follow these rules. And so Litespeed Server, it is completely compatible with all those commands. So you can have your rewrite rules, your security rules, you can block, you can do anything from your .htaccess file just like Apache, but with a few improvements. It is proprietary. There's a professional version, which is like if you become a web host and you want to use Litespeed, you would pay for the professional one, whereas Apache is completely open source. But there is an open source version of it, which has all the performance and security benefits. It just doesn't have as much support and some just kind of, you have to be a little bit more technical to install it. It's the 4th most popular web server as of now. It's got 5% usage versus 41 Apache, 31 Nginx, and 22% for IIS. That's, I think, as of around 2018. So those numbers might have changed a little bit. And it is the fastest growing. In 2016, it only had like 2% of usage. By 2018, it had 5.6. All right, so why am I speaking about this Litespeed web server? Like, what makes it great? The first thing is the capacity. So when we're talking about web servers, we're talking about when you host a website, you have a certain capacity of CPU and RAM to work with, right? And so your web server essentially takes those requests, processes them with the CPU and RAM, and displays them serves the pages to your users. And so a big bottleneck is in the capacity. How many requests per second can your website handle with your server setup? Obviously, you want the more requests, the more efficient your server is going to be. Litespeed web server is 84 times more requests per second than Apache. That's the difference between, let's just say, a really weak server between hosting one person on your website. So if somebody else clicks on it, it goes down, versus 84 people at the same time. That's huge performance and speed and stability. And you can see the numbers here. These are directly from there's a website. I'll have a blog post on this, and I'll put all the links that I got this information from. But essentially, you can with the Litespeed web server with caching. Now this is Apache with W3 total cache, which I would bet a lot of people have here. Nginx with their fast CGI cache, and Litespeed with their Litespeed WordPress cache. 69,600 WordPress requests per second versus 826 with Apache. That's huge. That's using the same server. That's not changing, that's not having one big server. That's the same server, processing more websites. And 10 times more than Nginx. The second thing is speed. Okay, so we can handle a lot, but does it do it faster? It's 29 times faster than Apache, and we measure that with static pages, because static pages just need to display, a single piece of content. They're not processing anything. 6 times faster than Apache. It's got built-in compression, and here are the numbers. 167,000 versus 5,000 requests per second from 100 users. So that's really huge in terms of performance. The last thing, security. You've got connection level limits, so it's got a built-in firewall in the web server itself. It's got a lot of these things that you pay a lot of money for in terms of security come built in, out of the box, native. well, I'm going to talk about security later, but this is one of the most important layers, because if you're blocking stuff, you know, the farther out you can block bad stuff, the less that it takes a load on your off of your server. So, you know, you want to block at the DNS level, at the server level, and then at the web server level, and then at the application level too. And then it checks the static file checking, which means that usually when they compromise websites, people will change permissions on your files so they can go in and change other stuff. And this checks for that. If your files have incorrect permissions, it will not serve those files to the internet. The last thing is OWASP and 6G rules. OWASP is Open Web Application Security Project. It's an open source project for security. They basically say these are the biggest threats to the internet right now, and this is how you block them. You know, it comes built in. And then 6G is the latest. Like, it's a list of the bad bots that are on the internet. So all these people that are crawling the internet looking for vulnerabilities, they automatically get blocked. All right, the next thing that was on the list, so we talk about Litespeed. Now, MariaDB. The database engine is essentially, you know, where your data is stored, where it's the brains of your WordPress installation. This is what coordinates everything that looks nice. MariaDB is an open source version of MySQL. It's totally compatible and free, open source. MySQL was developed by Oracle. It's going to be 25 years, I think, later this year. So it's quite old. The latest versions are pretty good, but most of the versions running right now of MySQL are, you know, horrible compared to MariaDB. So we're talking about 5.3 to 5.6, 5.7. Those are pretty bad in terms of performance. Why it's great? Again, it's faster. It just processes requests better. I'm going to talk about this in further a little bit, you know, in the next section. But it's going to take full advantage of, you know, of your multi-core servers. You know, your servers with 16 cores. MySQL just uses one core to do most of their stuff. The versions I spoke about. MariaDB tries to, you know, use multiple cores to process the data, which makes it a lot more efficient. And it's very compatible with key value caching systems, which is the next topic that I want to talk about. Does anybody know what key value caching systems are for databases? You wanna?
Yeah, so they're like mini fast databases. It's like being able to write down just a name for something and very quickly pull out whatever you attach that label to.
Perfect.
Rather than having a database where you have to ask a giant, all these rows and look for it, sit for it, you can very quickly ask for one label.
Exactly. I'm going to go into that in a little bit. So, then the last part of this stack, the PHP 7.3. This is essentially the language compiler. Like, WordPress is built on PHP. You know, it needs to understand this language, process it, and then serve it to the web server, essentially. 75% of websites run on PHP, so this is really, really important. 7.3 is 5 times faster than the legacy PHP, which is 5.6, 5.7 maybe. It forces secure code structure. A lot of times, if you're getting these errors when you upgrade to PHP version, and then you get these plugin errors, you know, it's usually because the code that was used is not secure enough. So PHP 7 is saying, hey, you have to code this in a different way in order to make it secure. And so it'll give you those errors. Those are for your benefit. You know, you don't want to go back to 5.6 just because it worked, because in the long term, you're gonna, you know, miss out on a lot. And it's not the hardest to learn. It's not the easiest to learn, but it's not the hardest. And here's some performance improvements from PHP 5.6 and comparing it with 7, 7.1, and 7.3. So that's a five-fold improvement in requests handled per second. All right, so we covered the stack. Now we're going to cover RDS and Redis. So RDS is an Amazon Web Services. It's a database engine. It's like, imagine you have your VPS, right, where you have your WordPress site. Imagine if you had another VPS right next to it that was only for the database. That was, that server was optimized to run databases. That's what RDS is. Essentially, I imagine a very high performing, and it's got either, tons of RAM, but Amazon does this, and they give you a little space in it to essentially run your databases in their server. It's called Relational Database Service, and it's, like I said, it's a VPS for running your database. So essentially, instead of when you connect your WordPress site, instead of connecting to localhost, you would connect to a host name, which would be the one that you would set up. And it's fully compatible with, so you choose the version that you want to run. So if you want to run MariaDB, or you want to run MySQL, if you want to run an earlier version of MySQL, if you want to try out with a new database, you can spin up a server, a free server, and play with that. All right. And why is it great? Why would having a secondary database server, help you? And the main reason is because when you're running a website, especially, and you have to think about millions of requests or thousands of requests per minute or per second. Your web server is essentially running the code, going to the database, waiting for that database to give you back some value, putting it back into the code, and then displaying it to your visitors. Here, your server is going to be just running that PHP code, and then your database server is going to be doing the request. So it's just going to send information back and forth. So essentially, you're going to be running your database on a super high performance server, and and what's left of your VPS, of your server, to run the PHP code is going to be more than enough. So just imagine you're coupling that with the Litespeed server, you're just getting these exponential gains in performance. Since the RDS is tuned for databases, your MySQL database or your MariaDB, it's gonna run those queries a lot faster. They come with automatic backups, they're called snapshots, and Amazon takes care of all the cleaning, all the maintenance. The database requires a lot of maintenance because it reads and writes a lot. So there's a lot of tables that are full of garbage, and so they take care of all that on their end. All right. So now that we talked about the database, so you guys know, okay, so you've got your WordPress site, you've got your database running. What is Redis? And Redis is essentially going to be what we talked about. It's going to be a key value system. So imagine you're the database or for your website, right? And so every time somebody pulled up your WooCommerce site, you had to go through a book, and look through every product before you find the product that they asked you for, right? Now, in most websites, you have a few products, 80-20 rule. 20% of your products are going to be 80% of your requests, right? And so after a couple of hours of this, you'd say, well, hey, I'm always picking up these 5 products, right? I could memorize them. So that's kind of what Redis does. Redis is going to take a snapshot of that and say, all right, I'm going to give it a value, all right? And I'm just going to put this, I'm just going to take a copy of this and put it aside. And so whenever that request comes in, you don't have to go through the whole through the whole book. You just say, hey, that's this one, serve it. So it doesn't even touch your database. And it does this continuously for all the database requests that get the most hits. So it doesn't do everything, because everything it would be just, it would be a database, essentially, a copy. It just does it for the most requested ones. And it's in cache, and so it's, instantaneously. And if you have a WooCommerce store or an e-commerce store and it's got tons of product and or tons of visitors, this is probably going to be your #1 performance gain. Like, you just see incredible amounts of performance with this. Sorry, I was supposed to go. All right, so it's a key value database object caching. So how does it work? So it's how I explain it. So it turns key value pairs. So it says this is, if your product ID is 007, it gives it a value, and it says this is product A4. And so whenever somebody requests, the ID 07, it's going to say, hey, this is A4, and it just displays it. It gives you all the information that you were looking for. Exponential improvements in applications, like if you have tons of products, tons of users, tons of threads, like membership forums. There's just so many, in most of the large applications that you know of, think, Airbnb, these car sharing apps, all these things, they're using Redis to cache that information. And the biggest and here I'm going to show you guys some numbers for the performance of CRUD operations. That's essentially what databases do: create, read, update, and delete. Those are the main points. So here you can see, I don't know how clear you can see that, but essentially Redis is the gray on the bottom, and so you got the performance going from 200 to 5,000 operations, So it's asking you to do so to create 5,000 tables, right? In using MySQL, it's going to be taking you between, around 2 or 3 seconds to do that. Whereas with Redis, you're looking at, between 0.01 and 0.1 second to do that same amount of work. This is where it probably gets the most performance improvement, and it's where it needs it the most, which is this is where you select or you read a table. So hey, grab me that information, grab me that product. Let's say we're trying to get 5,000 products using a MySQL database. We're talking about close to 100 seconds in time that it takes to process that. We're under 0.001 seconds with Redis. Why? Because it's right there. The information is right there. You don't need to go through the whole database for each item. They're all there for immediate retrieval. Update. So this is writing to the database. Again, MySQL does a lot better in this one, but 5,000, it's doing them in around a second. But Redis, 0.1 second. And deleting. These are all pretty decent speeds. Deleting is, it's essentially just removing a table, so it's the easiest operation from a processing point of view. But Redis way under 0.001 seconds for a doesn't even flinch when you throw 5,000 operations at it, because it's just deleting key values from it. It's deleting the key values first, and then it's deleting the database. So that's why the performance is so fantastic. All right, so we talked about that. Now we're going to talk about security. You know, the things, how to make a robust and secure installation. And this is probably one of the most important topics in WordPress today. Who here has gotten their WordPress site hacked, or for a client, or, you know, yeah, it's it's a thing. Think Windows 95, right? But it doesn't have to be. And so a lot of the times, most of the times, they're automated attacks, and they're just used to get your website to do either mine Bitcoin, or phishing scams, or just be dormant for a botnet. For when the time is to attack, they can call on your server to, you know, hit up a target and create a DDoS attack. There's that. There's a bunch more, but it's usually that more than, hey, I'm just gonna, you know, deface your website and so most people don't even know that they're hacked. They just kind of, you know, they don't know how to read code. They don't know, you know. So this is why security is important from like the core, from like, you know, the very first thing about WordPress, because that's WordPress's Achilles heel. All right. So like I mentioned before, for security, these are my kind of security measures and what I like to do. You want to start from, well, I'm starting from inside out, but the danger comes from outside in. So at the core level, you've got your server, right? You've got your VPS, and you've got Linux. Let's pretend you don't have anything else installed on there. You can install the, you know, IP tables and fail to ban, and that's gonna be your natural firewall. That's gonna be like anybody that tries to SSH in or log in with invalid credentials. You know, you can set an amount of time to lock them out. That's where it's gonna start. Then, how we talked about, you've got your web server level security. You know, that's where Litespeed comes in. It's got all that security built in. You know, you don't really need to do anything to it to set it up. You can modify. You can make it a lot stricter. You can add reCAPTCHA at a web server level. So, you know, if it instead of blocking, if it sees a suspicious visitor, it can just ask them to you know, tell you it's not a robot. And that's without you having to do anything. Well, you have to put in your reCAPTCHA code, of course. It's compatible with all the mod security rules that Apache has come up with. The 6th generation bot blocking, so comes with a lot of WordPress support. So I feel like Litespeed was built for WordPress. One thing that I forgot to mention is that the way it works, the reason why it's faster is it works asynchronously. It works, it's like if you go to a restaurant, imagine going to a restaurant and having the waiter take your order and then go get your drinks, and then he has to cook up the food, and then he has to serve it, and then, you know, once he's done, he can serve the next person. That's really inefficient. And the Litespeed server is like as if you had, you know, your server, your busboy, your cook, your runners, you know, everything does its smaller job. So it could handle 10 people coming in at a time, you know, without overwhelming the system. So so that's why I think Apache is kind of really good at loading static sites, but when it comes to dynamic sites like WordPress, you know, I feel like it falls short, and Litespeed is a lot more powerful in that aspect. I mentioned as reCAPTCHA and the OWASP rules. All right, and now, so we talked about the server level and the web server level rules. The web server level rules include all those htaccess rules as well, and these work a lot with those, but I'm just kind of separate them a little bit. The application level firewalls are going to be your plugins, okay? These are going to be what the software that actually goes on your WordPress site. I personally like Memcached and WordPress. I also have used all-in-one WP Security and Firewall. I like different features from all of these. The most important thing I think it is just to ban those failed logins. I have them banned for 3 months, so just that they don't even appear, like they don't even bug me. You want to set up 2-factor authentication on your WordPress login. You can do that with WordFence. I have like 3 or 4 more sites more that I need to set that up on. And then change your WordPress login, your folder. Right, that's going to be your central point of attack. I'm not even going to mention that. Don't use admin as your username. You know, don't please. And then the last part, as we're going out, you're going to have your DNS level security. All right, so these are the guys that are going to be working at the DNS level. So where the internet gets routed before it gets routed to your server. These services are gonna be put to work. And here you have Cloudflare. I think has anybody not heard of Cloudflare? All right, Cloudflares, I love them. AWS has a similar service called WAF and Shield, so Web Application Firewall and Shield. You have to connect those to Route 53. It's a pain. It really is a pain compared to Cloudflare, which does caching on top of it. It's just, Cloudflare is awesome. Use it. If you still haven't used it, use it. One of the great things is that it lets you create security rules at the DNS level. So for example, at the DNS level, you can block all from China, all from Russia, from North Korea, from wherever. If you're seeing a lot of traffic that is not your target traffic from a certain location, block it. All right, and then that's what that does. And then for security, you always want to log in, and this was a typo. You want to log in using SSH keys. I'm working on a WordPress article on a blog post on how to set up. I'll share that with you guys later. But has anybody used SSH keys to log into their server? All right, so a lot of you. All right, so make that a well-known thing, because SSH keys essentially it puts a file on your computer. That file needs to be read by the server when you connect. So you don't use a password. You can if you want, but it reads that file and it says, okay, this is a safe location to log in from, and it logs you in. It actually saves a ton of money in the long term, and it's extremely secure because nobody with even a password can log in. That's the major benefit. And the one rule, like if you don't do any of this, if you just have shared hosting with GoDaddy and you don't do any of these things, what do you think is coming? There you go. Just if nothing else, that's going to be your number one defense. All right, using a strong password is going to get you out of. It's going to take out that 99%.
And not the same password you use elsewhere.
And not the same password. And in fact, I get a lot of heat from this, but you shouldn't even know your password. It should be this 28 or 30 character, like gibberish. You should know one really strong master password, and that's where these password managers come in, where one really strong password gives you access to all these crazy random character passwords, different for each service. So hey, they hacked into this. I don't care. I don't care. Just change the password. It's not being used by any of my other services because each service, these have password generators built into them as well. So, you know, if they hack into, you know, Netflix, okay, well, you know, a lot of people use their same password for Netflix as they do their email, as they do their Amazon, and so you don't want to have that. You know, you want each service to have their own password. And if you need to log in, these all have the apps for iPhone, Android, and they even like let you unlock it with Face ID or Touch ID or your passcode. So you don't even have to type in the huge long password that you have to remember. I use LastPass, and I like them because everything's encrypted everywhere. Like they can't, if I lose my master password, they can't recover it for me. So I like that. All right. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Let's say I'm at somebody's service. I happen to be a site planner.
Okay.
And I like what you said. I'm interested. Everything's cool. How do I migrate? Is it a big deal to migrate from anything, Bluehost or wherever, to this?
To this, no. Essentially the only thing you need is your database. It's like a migration tool. Yeah, it's your database and your media files.
Nothing else.
Nothing else. Yep. And in fact, you don't want to migrate from like from like an Apache server or an Nginx server to this. I mean, you don't want to do like the normal like standard like plugin migration, because those server settings are going to be completely different. So what I do is I set up a new install with the new database, okay? And then I bring those files over to the new install, and then I connect it, and then I insert the database into the database I created. So and then boom, everything works. There's always a little couple of tweaks here. There's a follow symlinks command I always have to use, but you know, it's a lot easier than all the plugins have been nothing but trouble for me at least. I don't like them.
One more question. You mentioned Cloudflare. What about CDNs for
Yeah,
image distribution around the world?
absolutely. I'm just going to get on that.
Okay.
Yeah, Cloudflare is a CDN as well, so they'll perform that. I think it's a paid service, but AWS has something called Cloudfront. Yeah, and it's amazing. It makes websites really fast.
So it's a competitor.
I mean, you can use them together. So I like Cloudflare for their security. Okay, and Cloudfront, they just have more servers but not that many more. So it's a toss-up. But Cloudfront's pretty easy to implement, especially if you're using S3 as, like, let's say you're a videographer or a photographer, and you've got 100 gigabytes of material. Your website doesn't need to be this crazy thing, but you just need a lot of storage. I see a lot of hosting, they cap you at a certain level, and so what you can do is go to S3, and John was talking about a terabyte for $20 a month. So 100 gigabytes is going to cost you a fraction of that, $2 a month. So you serve it to that with CloudFront as a front end caching, and your websites are going to load incredibly fast. Your pictures are going to load incredibly fast. Your web server is going to be not going to take a hit because it's not loading anything from there, and that's what I would use, and that's literally not literally, but similarly what Netflix does. Netflix uses AWS. So every time you open Netflix, you're getting that content from an AWS server. All right, and so costs. How much? This thing must be really expensive, right? I mean, the examples I gave here, and I'm going to give some performance too. It's a T2 micro, right? it's free for the first year. I've got one on the free tier, and I've got one on the paid tier. And on the paid tier, I pay between $6 and $7 a month. RDS, same thing. It's free for the first year, $6 or $7 for the, and you can have 100 websites on an RDS. You know, you can have 10 instances, 10 micros, for example. For like, let's say you have clients, you can have 10 different servers, but you can have just one RDS. And if you go to the Pro, which is going to be I forget what it's called, but it's the next level up. It's only $30 a month, and it's got a ton of more stuff. Cloudflare's free. Open Lightspeed is free. WordPress obviously is free. And then after the first year, I pay 12 to 15 bucks a month. Yeah, I mean it's not an expensive thing. It takes, for me, it's taken a lot of tweaking and learning and just kind of self-teaching. But you know, I essentially took what a company charges minimum $600-700 a month for just for hosting, and I kind of wanted to apply that myself, and I did it, and I've been doing it, and it's a lot of fun for me. Yeah, everything in the AWS is going to be a virtual server. It's not shared hosting. This is your server, but that's in the shared hosting price range. I mean, you know, I have shared hosting with HostGator. I used to use it for my staging sites, but their security is just very, very, very bad. So I have, and that cost me like $12 a month. So, do you have a question?
Yes. So when you're spinning up sites, so you have new clients and things like that, with the providers, you have the option to cPanel to
Mm-hmm.
things, and then you go. What are you using for automation for the actual installation of the Apache servers and databases?
I have a script.
WordPress servers.
Yeah, I have a script that does this. So I don't use cPanel. I don't like cPanel. I mean, it has its place, but I don't use it with any of this. Yeah, no. There's not a lot of like Litespeed Server takes a lot of that automation. You know, I have a script that essentially, let's see, I keep adding to it. So it creates a database, and then it creates the folders on the server. And then it does the SSL certificate, and then it does the WordPress installation, and then the next thing I have to do is automate it so that it takes those database credentials and, you know, automates it in there. But I have to go in there and actually change that WP config file. But that's essentially what I do.
What's a virtual server versus where I might be at right now?
Okay, so a virtual server is so think of it as let me see. So like a locker room. All right. So in a shared hosting, you have a locker in a locker room, whereas in a VPS, it's like your own hotel room. Okay. There's more resources. Like you have a set amount of resources. You have complete access to the server. So like in shared hosting, there's a lot of port. Like you can't just open any port you want, right? Whereas in VPS, you can open it, and it's going to be your security. So they're just kind of they're part of a bigger server, but they're completely firewalled. So
the locker room's like the virtual server.
No, that's like the shared server. It's where if you have too much stuff, it eventually starts, you know, bothering the other people that own the locker around you. You know, it'll overflow, and the security is not great.
So this T2 micro, that's just your own like virtual server. You have like root access, and you can do anything you want with it.
Exactly. All right, and with this server, I've got two of them running. I've got one with about 17 websites that don't get a lot of traffic. I do see some traffic spikes, but they don't really. The server load is pretty low, and then I've got two websites that are two e-commerce sites that get a lot of traffic. And one of them, I didn't know this, but her products were displayed on TV. And so we had a huge bump in traffic. We were getting, 300 simultaneous users. And this is on a T2 micro. Like, that's not supposed to happen. And yeah, it didn't even go above 20% of server load. When she runs an ad campaign, we see up to like 150, 160 users per hour, like on an hourly basis, which is still, if I had to bet, I would say I don't think it could handle more than 100 users, but it does. It handles them flawlessly. So, with that, it does around 25% when they're continuous and they're buying and everything. And the RDS usage doesn't go above 10%. I mean, those servers are just incredibly powerful. Like, I can't say enough about it. Like, I love that stuff. I think every web hosting company should connect their databases to RDS, and it will just take, they need half the servers. And so you can easily do 115,000 visits a month, which is a lot. You can probably do double that, but I would be like safe to bet, 115,000. And any provider that can, guarantee you those numbers, they're gonna be $100 a month or more. Your WP Engine, your Kinsta, your Flywheel, all those, they're great. They all use this setup, by the way. I think a lot of them use Nginx, but I would bet that they're going to move over to a Litespeed server. And then this is what we were talking about before. If you want to save some more, what's really expensive on the EC2s, on the servers, is going to be your hard drive space in the server itself. So that it's about $1 a month per 10 gigabytes. So if you've got a 100 gigabyte, you want to add it on your server itself, you're looking at a good amount of money. So like I was saying, if you have a lot of media, if you have a lot of pictures, if you have a lot of information, you want to serve them from S3, really cheap, really fast, and you don't have to worry about it. I do all my backups on S3. And then Cloudfront, install it on for your server, for your EC2, and your S3 to serve your CSS, your JavaScript, and your fonts. Those are going to be cached and really fast. You're going to see those page speed scores really go, improve. But those numbers are tricky, so I don't put a lot. There's one number that's important, which is the time to when your site is fully displayed, which you can see if you sign up. Like if you have GT metrics, and you sign up for the service, like you register your email, it gives you that time to fully load, to your site is fully seen. And so that's the most important number, because if you're adding Google Ads, if you're adding Hotjar, if you're adding any of these SEO services, Facebook Pixel, that's going to add a ton of time to your loading time, which the user's not even going to feel, because that all is going to be loading in the background. So your site's already going to be working for them, but in the background it's still loading all those services, which you have no control over, how fast they are. And the last thing is kind of the future of WordPress. Where I see this going, this isn't like 10 years, this is probably 3 to 4 years looking ahead, is there's a lot of headless WordPress, so WordPress without a database, essentially static sites that are reading data from WordPress. So WordPress, I think, may become something like an ERP system where you have, you know, user-generated content. Let's say a used car market. You know, you have people uploading their cars and their information to it, and then you can have something like Gatsby that's just constantly grabbing that data that's being created and displaying it on a static site. And so I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that just because WordPress is so powerful as a platform, you know, that I don't think we've even scratched the surface to what it can do. I think the databases are going to eventually move to this key value pair system, you know, just by inertia, just because the performance improvements are going to be overwhelming. Hopefully there's a lot of people like me giving these talks and just kind of pushing it in that way, just because there's no reason to pay so much money to host your website, you know, with high performance. And then HTTP, this is something I might have most Apache sites are still using HTTP 1.1. Litespeed web server does natively HTTP 2, and they're working on HTTP 3 quick, which is going to be the next generation. You know, it's going to be what kind of talks from the DNS to your web server, and it's going to be focused on less requests and SSL built in. So you're not getting, you know, you're not doing that redirect and losing that time. So it's going to be all encapsulated. And I've read some of those technical papers, and you know, they're very, very difficult to read, but it shows like that there's a lot of improvement. And the Litespeed is on the board of the you know, HTTP. I forget what the standard is called. So that's it. I hope I was you know, a little bit useful. Any questions?
Yeah, I got a question. So if we wanted to start and create a server like what you've done,
Mm-hmm.
Amazon's got this whole, like just almost like an ingredient list of things you could hook up
Exactly.
to their services. Is there something that's like pre-baked where it says, I want to create a Litespeed server?
Yes.
And it brings up all these things you talked about?
Yes. There's a if you type in AWS Marketplace, there's all these. They're caked in. You know, they're recipes. Essentially, it's gonna build you a T2 microservices with a Litespeed web service with PHP 7.3, and then it's gonna have MySQL as a database, but you're not gonna actually use that one. You're gonna use the other database that you're gonna set up on this. That one I haven't seen for like the RDS, but yeah, it's got for everything. Like you can spin up cPanel, WHM, WHMCS, you know, essentially any other, like a mean stack, you know, just any stack that's widely available is going to be in that marketplace. Yeah.
Are there any videos that can walk you through how to do it?
Not that I know of. Like for each individual part there are, but I found that the tutorials online are just a lot. Like my goal for the next couple of months is to just put a lot of these tutorials up from what I've learned. Just kind of grab them, improve on them where I can, and then put them up on my website. So I'll try to have that to help out.